She walked into the airport like any other passenger, but in 5 minutes she'd be in handcuffs, while her name trended across the nation. The morning air inside Denver International was sterile and humming, an orchestra of rolling luggage, security announcements, and the faint hiss of espresso machines behind glass counters. Travelers moved with the weary rhythm of routine, their faces lit by cold blue glow from overhead flight boards. No one paid attention to the woman in slate-gray heels cutting through the terminal alone. No flashing cameras, no entourage, just confidence wrapped in composure. Dr. Nadia Bennett, 35, carried herself like a whisper with weight, graceful but unmistakably anchored. Her coat, a deep midnight wool, moved like shadow. Her carry-on glided beside her in silence. Nothing about her demanded attention, and that was intentional. In the world of high-stakes aviation, invisibility was power, especially when you were the youngest black CEO of one of the most influential federal contractors in the country, Meridian AirTech. She wasn't here to give a speech. She wasn't here for press. She was here on an unannounced inspection, boarding Flight 227 to Salt Lake City in coach like everyone else. Her mission simple: evaluate TSA and airport compliance with Meridian's federal integration system. No one knew who she was, and that's exactly how she wanted it. But someone else had been watching, not because they knew her name, but because they didn't like what she looked like. And 5 minutes from now, a TSA agent with a grudge, a tip from the shadows, and a dangerous assumption would change everything. The line at TSA Checkpoint C moved with mechanical slowness, suitcases dragging like anchors, trays clattering, belts squeaking under fluorescent glare. Overhead, the speaker system cracked with travel advisories, the sterile voice folding into the background noise of early flights and frayed patients. At the heart of it all, Dr. Nadia Bennett stood poised in silence, her breath even, eyes forward, posture unshakable. She didn't fidget with her phone, didn't scan for distractions. She observed. 3 people ahead, a father was trying to untangle his toddler's jacket from a stroller wheel. To the left, a businessman cursed under his breath as he repacked a toiletry bag. But Nadia wasn't watching them. Her gaze locked onto the woman posted by the ID booth. TSA agent Callie Denton. Late 40s, square-jawed, with eyes that scanned too long and a mouth fixed in a line just shy of polite. Her uniform was ironed sharp. Her gloves were already on. But her attention wasn't on the whole crowd. It was fixed on one person, Nadia. Not a glance, a stare. And Nadia felt it. Like heat from a cracked window, a stillness that pressed in from one side. Callie's eyes flicked down at the documents in her hand, then back up at Nadia, holding the gaze just a beat too long. "Step forward, ma'am," she said. Sweet on the surface, brittle underneath. Nadia moved, controlled, fluid. Her heels clicked across the tiles in a rhythm that didn't ask for permission. Callie reached for her ID without a word, examined it, flipped it, held it up to the light, then looked back at Nadia as if trying to solve a riddle she didn't like the answer to. "You traveling alone?" she asked. "Yes," Nadia answered, calm and clear. "What's your destination?" "Salt Lake City, Flight 227. Callie hesitated, eyes narrowing. "What's this credential?" she asked, tapping the federal seal on Nadia's clearance badge. "DOT and FAA verified," Nadia replied. "I'm on a compliance inspection." Callie didn't blink. Instead, she tilted her head, pressing a button on her earpiece. "Possible fraudulent credential," she muttered, requesting secondary. Nadia's breath stilled. Around her, conversations continued. A child laughed. A phone rang. Life moved on. But her world had paused. 2 agents stepped up. One was young, uncertain, the other older, already snapping on gloves. "I need you to come with us," Callie said flatly. Nadia didn't resist. She handed over her carry-on, every move deliberate. But in her chest, something old stirred. Something that smelled like her father's coat, like rubber floors and humiliation. 15 years ago, her father was dragged from an airport for defending someone else's dignity. Now she was being walked through the same glass maze for simply existing. Click, a phone camera behind her, a quiet gasp from someone in line. She was now a scene, a story, a symbol. Inside the secondary inspection room, the walls felt too close. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Her bag sat unzipped on the table. "Anything you want to tell us?" Callie asked. Nadia's eyes met hers, calm, sharp. "Not yet," she said, but she already knew this wasn't about protocol. It was about power. And soon the woman across from her would learn whose hands it really belonged in. The metal table in the inspection room gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, sterile and impersonal, like the silence that wrapped around it. Nadia sat, hands folded calmly on her lap, but her eyes never left the agents circling her belongings like sharks around a cage. Callie Denton unzipped the carry-on slowly, as if daring something explosive to leap out. One blouse, one leather folder, a copy of The Color of Law, a laptop with the Meridian AirTech logo engraved on the case. Nothing suspicious, unless you considered competence a threat. Callie pulled out the folder, flipped it open, and frowned at the federal seals. "You really expect me to believe you're who you say you are?" she muttered. Nadia didn't answer. Her stillness spoke louder than defiance, but inside, beneath that unshakable poise, a storm surged. Because this wasn't just a moment. This was history collapsing into the present. 15 years ago. She could still see it. Her father, Marvin Bennett, pacing their tiny apartment in South LA, jobless, humiliated, tossed from LAX security after confronting an officer for detaining a pregnant black woman without cause. He'd spent 20 years guiding planes through midnight fog, hurricanes, system failures. And none of that mattered the moment someone saw his skin before his badge. That day had rewritten everything for Nadia. She had built her life in response. Credentials, degrees, security clearances, a resume that read like armor. And still, it wasn't enough. Callie tossed the folder back into the bag with careless dismissal. "Sit tight," she said, turning to her colleague. "I need verification from upstairs." As she stepped out, Nadia finally spoke. "You should look closer at the clearance tag." The younger agent paused, surprised by the calm steel in her voice. "It's not forged," Nadia said. "You're about to make a mistake bigger than you understand." But the door clicked shut before he could reply. Nadia sat back, the leather of her chair cold against her shoulders. Her eyes scanned the walls, one security camera, one two-way mirror, every angle designed for control, surveillance pretending to be safety. She took a slow breath, counted 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. She didn't need rage, she needed timing. Outside, Callie leaned over the checkpoint desk, whispering fast. "She says she's DOT cleared FAA level 5, but that doesn't check out." The man behind the desk frowned. "Her ID scanned clean, Callie. No red flags." "She doesn't look like a federal exec," Callie hissed. "Maybe check your assumptions," he snapped. "You're already on thin ice after that Oakland incident." Back inside the room, the younger agent re-entered, his face tense, unsure. "We're just verifying," he said. Nadia stood slowly. "You have 90 seconds before this becomes federal." The agent froze. "Excuse me?" She opened her phone. One press, location beacon sent, real-time alert to her chief of security. She watched the message confirm delivery. Back in Washington, a dashboard lit up. Within minutes, the cavalry would move. And across the terminal, eyes were already watching. One influencer had caught everything on video, from the stare to the handcuffs. It was too late to stop what had begun. The past hadn't just returned, it had collided with the present, dragging the entire system with it. And Nadia, she was done playing invisible. The first siren didn't wail, it whispered. The kind of high-frequency ping embedded deep in the comms channels of federal contractors and aviation partners. A quiet alert that didn't draw attention but triggered immediate motion. Inside Denver International, unnoticed by most travelers, 2 black SUVs glided up to the restricted tarmac entrance. No headlights, no sirens, just quiet urgency. 3 individuals stepped out, one in a Department of Transportation blazer, one wearing an FAA credential, and one in a tailored black suit whose phone never left his hand. Back at the TSA checkpoint, Callie Denton was still on the edge of smug satisfaction, arms crossed, trying to justify her instincts to the checkpoint supervisor. "I'm telling you, something didn't feel right. You get a credential like that, You expect someone older, someone with a government handler, not a solo traveler in heels with attitude. The supervisor's eyes narrowed. You said her name was Nadia Bennett. Callie nodded. He tapped a few keys, then stopped cold, his face drained of color. Oh, hell. What? Callie asked, frowning. She's not just cleared. She's the CEO of Meridian AirTech. She's the one who signs off on our federal technology budget. Callie blinked. That's not possible. She's the reason you have a job, Callie, he growled, and you just detained her. A moment later, the door to the secondary screening room burst open, not from a TSA agent, but from the federal team that had just entered the terminal. Dr. Bennett, the lead officer said with practiced precision, "We apologize for the delay. We're here to escort you and resolve this immediately." Nadia rose calmly, controlled. Her wrists still bore faint red marks from the earlier cuffs. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Not yet. Callie stepped into the hallway and froze as the full weight of what was happening hit her like a wave. Wait, you're... Nadia turned to face her, eyes locked, voice even and sharp enough to cut glass. You have no idea who I am. But you will. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Passengers had started recording. Phones lifted silently. Eyes tracked every breath. Callie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just a weak shake of the head. The supervisor beside her stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a thin, fearful line. Nadia stepped past her slowly. No shouting, no vindictive words, just that unmistakable presence of someone who had waited a lifetime to be underestimated. And now, the reckoning had arrived. By the time she returned to the terminal floor, the videos had already begun to spread. Clips of a black woman being escorted in cuffs, then in dignity. The hashtags came fast. Nadia Bennett. She was the boss, profiled power, and for Callie Denton, the name she hadn't known an hour ago was about to define the end of her career. As for Nadia, she didn't look back. She walked toward Gate B-17 like a storm in heels, silent, focused, and radiating a kind of power that no uniform could ever touch. The quiet ones, they'd learn, don't stay quiet forever. The footage of Nadia Bennett being handcuffed had been replayed over 1 million times in under 24 hours. But it wasn't the arrest that lit the fire, it was the silence, her unshaken expression, the power in her restraint. By morning, media outlets were calling it the calmest dismantling of injustice ever caught on camera. Influencers reposted her full name in capital letters. Civil rights attorneys offered pro bono counsel, not realizing Nadia had an entire legal department on standby. The public didn't know her yet, but they were about to. In a private executive suite at Meridian AirTech's Denver hub, Nadia stood before a whiteboard scrawled with names and timelines. Rain tapped against the glass behind her like a ticking clock. A single message blinked on her phone. "We found the leak." Her lead cybersecurity analyst entered with a laptop tucked under one arm, eyes heavy from all-night tracing. "It wasn't random," he said. "Your travel info was accessed 2 days before your flight, outside protocol." "Who?" she asked quietly, already knowing. The analyst placed a printed document in front of her. Access log, digital signature, IP trace. It all pointed back to one name, Raymond Locke, Meridian's former VP of Strategic Accounts, a man she'd personally demoted 6 months earlier for shady procurement deals and unauthorized vendor kickbacks. He'd left without protest, too quiet. Nadia had assumed he was licking his wounds. Apparently, he'd been doing far more. He forwarded your itinerary to a contact inside TSA, coded language. "A favor for a favor," the analyst said. "We cross-checked his messages. It's him." Nadia stared at the file, jaw locked. Her fingers tapped once on the table, then again. She wasn't angry, she was calculating. "Has legal seen this?" she asked. "They will by this afternoon. HR too." But Nadia wasn't done. She turned to the whiteboard and circled a date from 3 months ago. A committee vote, a contract decision. Locke had pushed to renew a high-risk vendor known for data mishandling. Nadia had overruled him. He hadn't forgotten. This wasn't just a vendetta. It was a setup, executed through bureaucracy. She pivoted to her assistant. "Call the board. Emergency session. In person." Within hours, the core leadership team sat around a polished obsidian table, the air tight with curiosity and unease. Nadia stood at the head. I was profiled, publicly humiliated, but that was just the surface, she began. Someone inside this company weaponized access, used our infrastructure to set me up. She laid out the evidence, digital breadcrumbs, emails, timestamps, the connection to Locke. The room shifted, eyes widened. A few executives muttered curses under their breath. Then Nadia dropped the final slide, a whistleblower statement from a TSA agent confirming they'd received a tip about a suspicious black traveler matching Nadia's exact description, signed anonymously, routed from a private email tied to a shell company that Locke controlled. This wasn't negligence, she said. This was sabotage, a calculated betrayal. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Unanimously, the board voted to launch criminal proceedings and permanently blacklist Locke from federal contract eligibility. Justice didn't come from rage. It came from clarity, timing, and receipts. As the room emptied, one executive lingered, stunned. "How are you so calm?" Nadia simply smiled. "Because I expected it." 2 days later, Raymond Locke walked into the Meridian AirTech headquarters like a man too arrogant to feel the heat. Slicked back hair, cufflinks gleaming, a self-assured smile plastered across his face as if the building still answered to him. He had no idea what was waiting upstairs. In the top-floor conference room, the air buzzed with restrained tension. The glass walls overlooked downtown Denver, but inside it felt like a courtroom. A projector hummed quietly. Legal counsel lined the edges. Nadia Bennett sat at the head of the table, calm, spine straight, a folder of damning evidence resting in front of her like a loaded weapon. The door opened. Raymond stepped in, chuckling lightly. "So formal. You could have just called me." Nadia didn't stand. She didn't even blink. "You're here because you thought this company would never trace your fingerprints," she said. "You thought invisibility meant immunity." Raymond raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "I'm afraid I don't follow." She cut him off. "We have your IP logs, Ray. The tip to TSA, the shell company you used to hide the communication, the agent you manipulated." Her tone was even, but her words hit like cold steel. Raymond's smirk cracked, just slightly. "I made this company a fortune," he said, voice tight. "You think one mistake—" "This wasn't a mistake," Nadia replied. "It was a power play. You tried to publicly humiliate the CEO of a federal contractor. You sabotaged security protocol, and worse, you weaponized racial bias to do it." A gasp rippled across the table. Raymond's confidence faltered. "You have no proof that was the intent." Nadia nodded toward the projector. The screen lit up with a recovered message from his private inbox. "She likes to play invisible. Let's see how invisible she is in cuffs." Silence fell like stone. One board member stood immediately. "We don't need a vote. Terminate his equity. File the criminal referral." Raymond lunged forward, voice rising. "You can't do this. I built this place. You think Washington will back you after this circus?" Nadia stood finally. Her presence filled the room, not loud, not explosive, but gravitational, icy calm, absolute. "Washington already has. FAA.DOT.DHS. They're watching this moment, and I intend to set the standard." Raymond staggered back as security entered. He looked around the room, faces he once held influence over, now locked in silent condemnation. Not a single ally left. He was escorted out in silence, but the real change hadn't even started. That evening, Nadia released a live statement streamed across major networks. "In the wake of recent events," she announced, "Meridian AirTech will spearhead a coalition of aviation leaders focused on systemic equity, accountability, and transparency. We will not just lead in innovation, we will lead in integrity." She paused. "What happened to me was not an isolated event. It was the result of silence and systems left unchecked. That ends now." Within 48 hours, 3 major airlines signed on. By the end of the week, the TSA issued an internal policy review. Congressional aides requested a briefing. Change didn't come gently. It came from fracture and from the woman who refused to break. As Nadia stepped off the podium, she didn't feel victorious. She felt ready, because the confrontation was over. But the real work had just begun. Weeks passed, not quietly, but purposefully. Meridian AirTech's Denver office transformed from a high-rise of silent efficiency into a movement headquarters. Glass walls, once designed to reflect power, now let the world look in, and more importantly, let truth shine out. Internally, new policies were drafted. Externally, airport security partners scrambled to comply with the emerging industry standard set not by regulation, but by resolve. And in the center of it all, Dr. Nadia Bennett kept moving. She walked through terminals without an entourage, but this time people noticed. Not because of her title, because of what she'd done with it. TSA agents straightened when they saw her. Flight crews offered quiet nods. Even passengers, young, old, black, white, seemed to recognize her not by name but by impact. One afternoon, she stopped at Midway International in Chicago, where Meridian had just completed a system overhaul. No press, no flash, just inspection. The lines moved smoother, the security process flowed with consistency, but what struck her most was the human element. She paused when she saw a young black father moving through screening with his daughter. The girl, maybe 7 or 8, clutched a stuffed lion in one hand and her dad's boarding pass in the other. A TSA officer smiled gently, scanned their IDs, and waved them forward without a second glance. No suspicion, no pause, just dignity. It wasn't a miracle. It was design. Later that evening, back in her hotel suite overlooking Lake Michigan, Nadia opened her laptop. Her inbox pulsed with updates, legal, legislative, operational. But one email stood out. The subject line read simply, "Thank you for making space I can trust." The sender was anonymous, the body of the message just one paragraph. A story from a woman who had once been detained at an airport for traveling alone while black. She hadn't spoken about it for 10 years. Until now. Nadia sat back. The city lights glimmered across the water below. She thought of her father, of Marvin Bennett, and the day everything shifted in that small LAX terminal. She thought of the shame he carried until the day he died, and how the system never once apologized. But now she realized they were being forced to change, not by lawsuits, not by riots, but by the clarity of one unshakable voice that refused to be silenced. Her phone buzzed. It was Raina, her niece. "You're trending again," Raina said, laughing softly. "They're calling you the architect of airspace equity." Nadia smiled faintly. "I didn't build it alone." "No," Raina said, "but you laid the foundation when no one else even saw the cracks." As they hung up, Nadia stood by the window and whispered the words she'd been carrying since Denver. No more silence. Not in boardrooms, not at gates, not in the face of bias dressed up as policy, because justice wasn't loud. It was consistent, it was deliberate, it was now. And Nadia Bennett, once invisible by design, had become a beacon for a future that no longer whispered. It spoke, and the world finally had no choice but to listen. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks quietly through an airport, gets handcuffed without cause, and still refuses to flinch. Dr. Nadia Bennett's story isn't just about one woman, one injustice, or even one system. It's about what happens when someone chooses clarity over comfort, truth over convenience, and action over silence. Not once, but every single time the system pushes back. For too long, silence has been mistaken for professionalism, restraint confused with compliance. But there's a difference between peace and suppression. And Nadia taught us that choosing not to shout doesn't mean you've surrendered your voice. It means you're choosing your moment, and when that moment comes, you make it count. The lesson here isn't just about racial profiling. It's about what we normalize when we stay quiet. It's about the dangers of invisibility, even when it's worn like armor. Because excellence, credentials, and composure don't always protect you. Not when the people in power refuse to see you. But the most powerful part? Nadia didn't fight back with rage. She fought back with receipts, with poise, with systemic change. She didn't just demand an apology, she restructured the process. She didn't seek revenge, she built reform. And in doing so, she reminded us that true leadership isn't reactive, it's intentional. So what can we take from her story? That quiet doesn't mean weak, and visible doesn't mean safe. That sometimes the most radical act is to keep walking forward with your head held high, even when the world tries to shrink you. But most of all, we learn this. Your silence may protect you for a while, but your voice, used wisely, can protect generations. Speak when it matters, act when it's hardest. And remember, justice doesn't need to be loud to be unforgettable, it just needs to be undeniable. If this story struck a chord, if it made you pause, reflect, or even feel something deep in your chest, then don't let it end here. Dr. Nadia Bennett's journey is a reminder that power doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always come with sirens or speeches. Sometimes it arrives in silence, disrespected, detained, dismissed, only to rise with such precision that the system itself has no choice but to change. She didn't need to scream to be heard. She didn't need to fight to win. She needed one thing, the courage to confront injustice with unwavering clarity. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her dignity. She redefined it for every person who's ever been told they didn't belong. This story isn't just about profiling. It's about power. It's about who gets seen and who gets silenced. And it's about what happens when someone decides they will no longer disappear for anyone's comfort. So if you believe in stories that reveal what's broken, but also show us what's possible, if you believe that quiet voices can echo louder than hate and that real change starts with bold truth, then don't just scroll past. Subscribe to the X Daily Stories channel, your front row seat to stories that challenge assumptions, celebrate resilience, and light a fire under everything we thought we knew. We're not just telling stories, we're reclaiming them. One voice, one choice, one turning point at a time. New stories drop every day, cinematic, raw, unforgettable, drama, redemption, poetic justice, and life lessons that stick with you long after the screen fades to black. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us, because the next story might just be the one that changes your perspective forever. Your voice matters, your story matters, and around here, silence isn't the end, it's just the beginning.